today we will share with you, dear partners, the experience on geo-expansion and partner-to-partner programs here. I have great pleasure to co-host this webinar with Piwik PRO company here, Piotr Korzeniowski. And Piotr, can you just, at the beginning, tell us a little bit about who is Piwik PRO? Who is actually the company here?
Okay, so starting from the very beginning, thank you, Dariusz, for inviting me to this webinar. And yes, before we go into discussion about how we should geo-expand, I think it makes more sense to dive deeper into what company we actually are first, because some of the tips that we have compiled may not be applicable to your product, services, or the market that you may be in currently with your own company. So in a nutshell, we license software that is an alternative solution to Google Analytics. It basically gathers online visitor interactions on websites and mobile apps to build customer profiles. For those of you who rather see than have me describe the solution, I've read some screenshots. I won't be dwelling on those. I'm not here to try to pitch my product. I'm here to talk about the geo-expansion, but just to set the stage for all of you on this webinar. And maybe just to give you an idea of what kind of organization we currently are, we are around 100 people strong around the world. We have headquarters in Poland. This is where we come from. This is where our management team and product teams are located. And we have to date expanded with offices in Germany, Netherlands, and the USA.
So can you comment, Piotr, how it all started? You mentioned about Germany, Netherlands, United States. Sounds like you are present in several countries. So how the whole journey started for you? Where did you go on first?
Yeah, so obviously we started with setting up a company in Poland, but this is not where our customers come from. We only have closed our first Polish customer in Q4 last year, so 7 years into the journey. It all began with the first customers that we have acquired for the German market, and around the same time we also closed the first customer for the US. And since this first acquisition, we just tried to build over the customer base in those two countries. Then followed a series of tests. So we have tried to expand to United Kingdom several times, France, Iberia, the Nordics, and we try to do sales around the world. So plenty of tests around, but in a nutshell, we started with Germany, and which followed by the US. So we are currently catering the needs of over 200 enterprise customers and governments in more than 40 countries. We mainly sell to three industries, which are financial institutions like banks or healthcare companies. This is valid for the US, and the governments. And this is across the globe. So no matter the geography, the governments are actually one of the biggest industries for us. And maybe just to close this overview of the company, so the viewers can compare to their organization, I will also share our revenue structure. So roughly 70% of our revenues is generated in the near vicinity or exactly in Europe. 23% of our revenues are in the US. The rest of the world, so Africa, Asia, South America, is only 7% right now. And Polish market is only 1%. This is in the other EMEA slice here. So it's not really significant at all.
Right. You mentioned that you started in Germany. I see now, you expanded to the area. You are also present in Benelux. So how did you explore the new markets? What was your strategy to conquer next ones?
Yes, sure. So maybe let's discuss how we actually try to set the stage before we go to another market. So first of all, we try to see where the demand goes from. So for all the people out there, I think it makes sense for me to explain that we started off as a service company that was providing maintenance and support services for an open source product called Piwik. Now it's called Matomo. It also is how our company came to be. And after a while, we built our own intellectual property and started selling it as a separate product. But our first customer base came from monetizing the open source software. And in our case, the greatest demand or the greatest customer base for this open source software was actually in the Western Europe, mainly in Germany, some installation in the US and the Nordics. So this is how we actually decided, like it worked at the very beginning. So the first 3-4 years of the company is how we decided on the next step. It's not true anymore, but it was very true when we thought about the geo-expansion in the first place. What makes sense after you have the demand set, like you know what is actually the thing that your customers are buying from you. Then we devised a test for ourselves to actually expand to another market. So it was mainly about the time. So how long do we give ourselves to try and test drive our idea? And in our case, we always have capped this time at 2 times the sales cycle that we have. So we sell to enterprise customers, and the sales cycle is anywhere between 3 to 6 months. So we thought to ourselves that giving like twice the average sales cycle, so anywhere between 6 to 12 months, is actually something that makes a lot of sense. We also have constrained a budget, so we do some kind of a projection of what are the expected revenues from the next market, and the marketing and sales budget is always capped around 50% of what those revenues for the first year would be. And if we cross the budget, we also decide to just go back and crawl back to the markets that we already know. And there are some other factors like existing success stories. So whether or not you have existing customer base where you can replicate the story or the implementation for similar companies on the other market that would resonate with the prospects, or localization. Yeah, or localization, which means basically, should I translate my marketing materials, sales materials, or the product itself?
Can you comment a little bit more here about this localization? Because we see and we have some feedback from the partners that, there are some countries, some markets in the world when the localization is extremely important, localization of a product or a solution or a materials or case studies. There are some markets like, for example, France or Germany or Russia or Japan, when this local flavor, localization is extremely important here, while the other ones can say, English ready content here. So can you share us some experience, your experience, how it works in your case, please?
Sure. So a vast majority of our materials, whether it is sales materials, marketing materials, or the product is translated to, it's only in English, but for some markets, we've decided to tweak it. So for instance, In Germany, we had a separate sales and marketing team in Cologne, and we've decided to do a separate type of marketing activities to the global ones. So I would say that we created a very local version of our product or of our company there. Obviously, we also translated the product. We also hired German-speaking support. So the customer was always facing German-speaking personnel, which actually was a great customer experience to have. Similar to that, we tried to expand to other markets such as France or Iberia, but there we limited our localization efforts to hiring either Spanish or Portuguese or French-speaking salespeople, and translating some small landing pages or blog posts that they have some materials at hand that they could nurture their prospects with. It generated the meetings with the end prospects, but I don't believe that it was entirely successful because the moment you needed to have a solution architect on the call, which were German speaking or English speaking, then it all fell apart. For instance, in the French for the French market. We also, for some of the markets, we only do English materials for sales and marketing, but we localize the product. This is true, especially for Finland. So we translated our product to Finnish, but all business relationships are held in the English language, and it works quite well for that market.
Yeah. Benelux or like Scandinavian markets, I would say English content is good enough. You mentioned France, and it's very important to have a local content here. We have experience with one of our partners who from FMCG sector, having like Salesforce automation solution, driving FMCG sector here in one of our Central Eastern Europe countries. The solution was so good in the market for this French company in FMCG that there was a decision simply, hey, if it's so good in one of our countries, let's put this solution to the France, to headquarters, to have this solution to be developed worldwide, like, one solution that fits all the markets where this company exists. And of course, there was like initial presentation that needs to be done in this French headquarters in Paris. And the whole team prepared the presentation, prepared the content, they fly there to Paris. And this management of this French company, of course, appeared here and started to the meetings by speaking just in French. So it's it's really extremely important to take this local flavor into account in the markets wherever the partners you want to go here, like France, Germany, Russia, or Japan. That's simply extremely important to be ready, either by yourself with your direct speaking and local persons, or through the local partners who can help you drive the markets here.
This is actually very true. We have similar experience for the French market, where we just didn't have enough client-facing roles that could speak in French to do it, or we didn't have enough budget to actually allocate to conquer this market. And your comment about working through partners instead is actually true. This is what we do on roughly every market that we're currently in. We have at least one partner for each region that we operate on, and we have partners that almost exclusively generate business for some of the regions. For instance, there is a system integrator in the Nordics that does majority of the lead generation and closing business for us there. So it's not that you always need to invest or in a local presence, local office, and local client-facing roles. It just means that you need at least somebody who can work with the partner directly to help him sell the solution with you. Maybe on that note, it's also interesting in our case that we, even if we invest in client-facing roles, even if we invest on the new market to set a new office, we don't do any sales directly, so we don't go on a face-to-face meetings. From the very beginning of the company, so even if we have somebody sitting in the office in New York, he doesn't leave his office. He's just on video conferences or telephone all the time, trying to generate the business and talk to prospects. And keeping in mind that we only sell to governments and corporations, it kind of gives you the idea that it's doable. Even on for those verticals, you can still sell to them remotely.
Yeah, and I think it's extremely important, especially right now when we go into more and more digital experience, digital connections, digital partner to partner, or digital expansions, through webinars, through the content rich. So if you have a positive experience here, then it's great, and I think it's one of the key areas that needs to be developed, further with this growth of the geo-expansion and partner-to-partner build. In the later part of the presentation, I will also describe how Microsoft can help you here in these new forums. You mentioned several functions here. You mentioned how you prepared for the geo-expansion from the resources and capabilities here, and there are always these questions, in general coming, hey, shall we have like a local sales people, local marketing, or like say probably we can have some functions, locally present, say sales people, but marketing can be done, on HQ level in one of the countries and then spread worldwide. So how you approach here? What's your recommendation? What works for you?
Mm-hmm. So with marketing specifically, we decided to do it globally, with the exception of some small local tests. So we have, for a couple of years, created a local marketing team in Germany, or we have decided to work with partners or directly create from scratch new content for markets such as Iberia or France, or just to translate our landing pages and main website to different versions of the different language versions, basically. It's all about content for us. 95% of the sales we do is inbound, which is generated mainly by paid advertising, coupled with the content that we create. This content is created out of our headquarters here in Poland, and we, whenever it makes sense to do small investments, small translations or case studies localized to our local market, we just do it. We just try to make sure that it serves a set purpose. So first of all, we set some kind of a budget on those activities. From our perspective, it should be just small. Translation services are not something that is too expensive, and this purpose that this translation serve is mainly to increase our outreach capabilities. So we just would like to invite to the discussion our new prospects, and for different markets, it may be a different set of content. For instance, in the Netherlands, we only translated parts of the website to Dutch. Everything else is being done in English. Whereas for Spain, we decided to translate marketing content like comparisons or vendor comparisons or blog posts that would be more applicable to the customers we tried to find on the Spanish market.
Right.
Yeah.
When you build your local teams globally, when you expand globally, What you take into account, especially when you recruit local people, local teams, when you expand your presence in the market, what are your criteria for effective team selections here? Can you share your so far experience from the countries?
Yeah, I believe that everybody should be cautious of the US as the first market that we invested a lot of money to learn to stay there. So most of those tips are our learnings from expanding to the US. So first and foremost, we would recommend not to shorten the recruitment process. In our case, our recruitment process for the first person that we hire on a new market is 3 stages, comprises of 3 stages, and we just don't want to shorten it. It just helps us to get the best talent out there. We also always try to get credentials. There are plenty of people who oversell themselves, especially on the sales and marketing positions. This is very common. So even if you are in love from the very first interview with a prospect or with a person, please just take your time with the decision making. And one more thing that you need to take into account is whether or not this person was already working remotely for headquarters in Europe. If you are recruiting for the US person, for a US person, or even remotely on the European market. So if this person has what it takes to actually work 100 kilometers from you, from the management team, or from the other salespeople located elsewhere. This is the tips. Those are the tips around recruitment, but equally important to the recruitment is the onboarding. So we failed miserably onboarding people and onboarding partners, because the onboarding of new business development representatives or marketing people is very similar to onboarding partners. And what we have as a learning is to always have up-to-date materials. And if you have a sales process that already works on any other market, regardless what are the market specifics, but if it's battle-hardened process, it's nice to have it written down somewhere, and so the new person doesn't start from scratch, but has tangible material to work and start with, to try to replicate and adjust to the new market. And last but not least, I would recommend taking this person over for 1 month onboarding to your headquarters to see whether or not this person can fit your work culture. And I believe that around people, this would be the things that you need to look out for very much. I guess that from the presentations perspective, we've compiled that with Dariusz before the webinar. I believe that those are the main tricks, and tips that we have up our sleeves. I would really love to hear what are the things that our audience would like to learn about, and reserve some time at the very beginning of this webinar to answer your particular questions. Or you can reach out to me directly through LinkedIn, or however you please, if you have any further questions around that topic, if we don't make it at the very end of the presentation.